Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
How are you today, Mr. Alpert?
I feel great. This is a beautiful day. I like the weather. I'm glad I wasn't here about a month and a half ago. Whoa. Yeah, and I'm from the West Coast. I like warm weather.
Now, Herb, we just heard that video, Putting on the Ritz, from your current album, In the Mood.
This is from the last album. This is from Steppin' Out.
Oh, this is from
the
Stepping
album
Out.
that we won a Grammy with, by the way.
Well, my mistake, In the Mood is your latest album. And like Putting on the Ritz, there's a few old songs on that album, like Begin to Begin.
You know, I think that melodies, the old melodies, not that they're old melodies, but they're melodies that linger, you know, like the music that was written in the 30s, the 40s, even maybe some of the 50s, those melodies that kind of stick to you. You find yourself whistling them for no apparent reason. So those are the melodies that, you know, a lot of the artists kind of go towards because they're fun to play. They're fun for me to play. My whole thing has been, if it's fun for me to play, it's going to be fun for at least some people to listen to.
As you guys know, or may not know, he's like a walking music business trivia guy, you know. He started A&M Records back in the day, and even before A&M Records, you had some forays into the music business. You produced the song Alley Oop by the Hollywood Argyles, right?
Well, before that, I wrote a song with the great Sam Cooke.
Yes.
I wrote Wonderful World, don't know much about history. I wrote that with my good friend Lou Adler and Sam Cooke. And Sam taught me a lot about the record industry.
I was going to ask, what did you learn from Sam Cooke about
Sam was just a natural. You know, he had a real flair for writing songs. And it was kind of a mystery because he'd come up to me and he'd show me a notebook that he had with some lyrics. And I'd look at the lyrics and I'd say to myself, man, that really looks corny. What is that? How does the song go? He'd pick up his guitar and start playing this lyric that I thought was really corny, and all of a sudden it turned to magic. I mean, his intent, his way of phrasing, his authenticity was just overwhelming, and he was the nicest person you could ever meet. And he used to tell me, he said, Herbie, he says, people are just listening to a cold piece of wax, and it either makes it or it don't. And when you're auditioning somebody, which he did a lot for his own label that he started called SAR Records, he used to, close his eyes or turn his back on them and listen to them. He didn't want to be intimidated by if they were extremely handsome or if they could, dance. He was just listening to the artist. And I took that and used that at A&M when I was auditioning artists.
Well, he was, like you mentioned, he had that record company, SAR. He was such a savvy businessman as well. Did you learn things from him business-wise, other than the artistic side?
Well, it's just the way he treated people. I recorded for a major record company prior to A&M, and I was treated in a strange way. When I was recording in the studio there, which was very cold, by the way, it was, white on white on white on white, and it was like, I was a number. I was like 38247, take one. I had no name. And so I was listening to a playback in the control room, and I wanted to hear a little more bass. So I went to the console, and I lifted up the bass track, and the engineer actually slapped my hand and said, don't ever touch that board again. This is a union house, and blah, blah, blah. And I filed all that, and I said, wow, shouldn't the record industry revolve around the artist? And so when we started A&M, and that was my main concern, I wanted it to be a great environment where you felt comfortable, wanted to make the studios really comfortable to be in. And, you walk into a place that's kind of shabby and cold, you feel like the sound is not good, even if the sound is good, yes. But if you walk into the right environment and you make it comfortable, it's a different story. I mean, at A&M, in Studio B, I put in this huge crystal right in the wall. I mean, it was huge. And every now and then I'd see an artist go up there in front of the crystal, and it was like they were in front of the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, praying for a hit or something.
Speaking of hits, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of Whipped Cream, that great record.
Right, yeah, I get a lot of attention on that. I don't know, you guys look like you might be too young to even remember Whipped Cream. But yeah, okay. But it was a big album, and it had this great cover of this girl who was doused in it looked like whipped cream, but it was actually shaving cream. And a lot of people would come up to me and say, I just love that album, the Whipped Cream album. I said, man, thank you so much. Have you heard the music? Not really, but the cover, you know.
But for you folks who may be too young to remember, at this time when this album came out, at one point, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass had, was it 3 top 10 albums simultaneously?
There were 20. On the top 20, we had 5 albums. We had 4 in the top 10. And wow. Yeah, it was an amazing time because timing. I think timing plays an enormous part in the success of any artist or anything that you happen to be doing. It was the time when television was really breaking artists, and because of this record I had, Taste of Honey, which was actually on the B side of the original release. And when I got the group together and we were playing in Seattle, Washington, I used to play Taste of Honey, and the audience would go crazy for it. So it was like having my own focus group. But my partner, Jerry Moss, was promoting the other side. On the other side was a tune called Third Man Theme. And so I called him. I said, Jerry, man, we're on the wrong side. It's Taste of Honey, I'm telling you. He says, nah, man, you can't dance to it. It's too long. It stops in the middle twice, and you know it's not good for radio. I said, I'm telling you, man, it's that record. And so we finally turned it over. And when that record hit, it took about 3 months. When it hit, all of a sudden I was doing, you know, all the big shows, the Ed Sullivan Show and the Dean Martin and all the, you know, major television, and that just broke the record right wide open. And so then people started buying the previous albums, and that's why there were, you know, 4 albums on the top 20 at the same time.
Now, the A and A&M, I used to love the logo, a little trumpet in the middle between the A and the M. M is for Jerry Moss. Exactly how did you guys start A&M Records?
Well, you know, in 1962, when we started, there were a lot of little record companies just operating out of the trunks of their car. I mean, you didn't need an office, you didn't need anything, because if you recorded a record, you had a master, you could take it up to a radio station in those days, and if the program director happened to like it, you might put it on the air right then. Wow. And then, or else it would go into a weekly meeting and they'd vote on it. So it was rather easy if you had the right record to get some motion going. So we released it, and A&M was actually our third choice. The original name of A&M was Carnival Records, and there was prior usage of that name. Another company in Texas had that name, and then the second choice, I can't remember what that was, but the third choice was A&M. We released the record. The Lonely Bull became a big hit, and then I got this magical letter from a lady in Germany, because this Lonely Bull record was an offshoot of my experiences in Tijuana at bullfights. For 3 years, I used to go in the spring to watch them fight bulls, which I don't think is a great sport anymore, by the way. But anyways, it was a big hit. And I got this letter, and I thought it was kind of funny when I first read it, but then I got it. This letter said, Dear Mr. Alpert, thank you for taking me on this vicarious trip to Tijuana. And I thought, wow, it was that visual for this lady that she got the feeling of being in Tijuana. I'm going to really think about making visual music from now on. I mean, music that takes you someplace, opposed to like elevator music. You get into the elevator, and it's not bad music. It's just it doesn't stick. It's just there. It doesn't offend you. It doesn't make you feel good. So I wanted to make that type of music, and that's what I was always pursuing.
And then when the record company started, you guys had so many great hits, so many great bands. What comes to mind first is Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66. Mega hits. And you also did other Latin music, which was different for pop record companies at the time. Why did you go that direction?
Well, for the longest time, it was like the Tijuana Brass, and then we kind of opened up the vision. And then, you know, my partner, Jerry Moss, and I, we wanted to get artists that had something uniquely special to say in their own special way, opposed to the beat of the week. We didn't want to get the record records that sounded like they had been there before. So that's why we got the Cat Stevens of the world, and Sting, and the Police, and Quincy Jones recorded for us, Janet Jackson, and.
But at the beginning, Herb, you didn't have those names. You had Chris Cortez, Sergio Mendes. People didn't know who those folks were. So you had to feel like you were doing some groundbreaking then.
Well, it was a slow grow, but then at one point we had this image of being this soft, kind of middle-of-the-road company. And that's when we just opened it up. And we picked up a record called You Were On My Mind by the Wee Five, and that was a #1 record. And then, people used to come with masters, and if you wanted to release the master, you could sign them, and you could sign the group. And so I always used that same technique, that Sam taught me, of just closing my eyes and listening to it. And I heard this master, and I said, man, I hate this thing. It's too long. It's out of tune. I remember the original record. I didn't like it, so I turned it down. Well, that happened to be Louie Louie. And that record was like #1 for 8 weeks. Every time I heard it, okay. But I'll tell you something, I still never liked that record. So, truthfully, it's like, you go with your gut and leave it at that. I went with my gut with the Carpenters. I signed the Carpenters, and they were like very soft. Yeah, and, I heard this, someone slipped a tape, through the fence at A&M, and listening to it in my office, I closed my eyes, sitting on the couch, and the speakers were in front of me, and all of a sudden it felt like this voice, Karen's voice, was like sitting right next to me. It was had so much presence. So I met them, and we signed them, and it took a little while, but and fortunately I got a song from Hal David, which is a whole other story. I asked him if he had a song that didn't feel like he had the right recording, or found himself whistling in the shower. He sent me Close to You, wow, which I recorded myself as a follow-up to This Guy's in Love with You, which was a #1 record. So I had this Close to You recording, and listening to the playback in the studio, my friend Larry Levine was the engineer, and he engineered all of the Tijuana Brass records, and he was a dear friend of mine. And I said, what do you think? He says, man, you sound terrible singing this song. And so I lost my confidence on that, put it in the drawer, and in 1970 I gave it to the Carpenters, and that was the one.
Hey, man, they had a string of amazing hits. We've Only Just Begun, Close to You. Did you think they were going to be as big as they were?
I thought they would be successful, but I didn't think they were going to be as big. They are huge and still selling records, and God rest her soul. She was a darling. She could really sing, and if you asked her, what's your real strength, Karen? She says, I'm a drummer. She was a drummer, and that's how it started.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you the name of a few artists. Just give me your thoughts. Cat Stevens, let's start there. Cat Stevens,
totally original, wonderful artist, wrote great songs. You could just see him and just with him and a guitar could knock you out, because it was intense, it was passionate, it was real, and he had songs that didn't sound like anyone else's songs.
I've always loved the rock singer Paul Rodgers, and he had the group Free. What about Free?
Well, Free came out of England, and that was the group, at that time when it happened, I wasn't real, I was traveling with the Tijuana Brass, so I wasn't really totally into their music, to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm. But they had a major hit. Joe Cocker.
Well, Joe Cocker turned me around, because I came up through the classical world, and then I started listening to jazz, and I got infected by, Miles and Coltrane and Louis Armstrong and all the great jazzers. I just said, I want to close my eyes and just play what I want to play when I want to play it, So rock and roll to me was a little strange. I didn't really get it. It just sounded like a lot of noise for me at one time. And Joe Cocker was on our soundstage at A&M rehearsing with the Mad Dogs and Englishmen. It was Leon Russell on piano, and he had two drummers, and it was, Rita Coolidge and some other singers.
Mary Clayton was one of those singers.
And Mary Clayton, for sure. And so I walked into that soundstage, got with my eyes closed. I sat on the soundstage and I started listening to him. And all of a sudden, I got goosebumps. And I opened my eyes, and Joe was doing his gyration with singing. And I thought, wow, I get it. It's good. It's real. It's honest.
The Police.
Well, the Police, that's an extraordinary group of 3 guys. They sound like 8 people playing. And of course, Sting, who is an absolute gentleman and tremendous artist, can write a great song. Mm-hmm. He writes a great song. And when I saw him the first time at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles, Sting looked like he was on a pogo stick, jumping across the stage with his long blonde hair. And it was beautiful. The guys were great. And we were always proud to have them on our label.
Janet Jackson.
Well, Janet was Janet. She has an attitude about what she wants to do. I did a record with her called Diamonds, which was the #1 record. That was produced by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. She's unique. She has a sexy way of presenting her thing. Nice voice. She has a good time. And I think the artists that can dance real well have a real advantage because they put it in the groove. They put it in a slot that makes you feel good when you listen to it. And Janet can certainly dance, and I think that was part of her success.
Now, for me, growing up, what I really loved what you did was, of course, the jazz. So Quincy Jones.
Well, you can't say enough about Quincy, what he's done, and he's just... he's one of those guys that everybody loves him. If you don't see him for a year, he comes on like we were talking yesterday. He's just an amazing artist. He's known all the great artists through the years. He's played with them. He's wrote arrangements for him. He did the things with Sinatra, with Basie, with Duke Ellington. The guy was great, is great, and I love him.
Okay, what about your own trumpet playing? I understand that you were a big Clifford Brown fan. Is that true, the jazz player?
Well, every trumpet player was a Clifford Brown fan because the guy was on another planet. He was just unbelievably prolific, talented, and unfortunately, he died a tragic death when he was 25, and he was an amazing artist.
Chet Baker also was on A&M.
Chet Baker was on A&M. Chet Baker was a genius. Chet Baker didn't know a C chord. He didn't know what he was playing, but he could play through a maze of serious changes. Like he knew exactly what he was doing, but it was all instinct. And unfortunately, his disease got him because he couldn't control himself. He had a terrible habit. The last time I saw him, came by the office, and we had a nice conversation because he was a sweet guy. And I gave him he didn't have a trumpet, so I gave him a trumpet that I had in my garage that was the type of trumpet that he liked to play. It was a Martin Committee trumpet. I gave it to him, and unfortunately was pawned the next day. But Chet Baker was a special, special talent.
I find it amazing, and I just found this out, that A&M was the first record company to record in America Antonio Carlos Jobim.
And do what?
Record Antonio Carlos Jobim.
Oh, well, sure. Yeah, we did, and Milton Nascimento.
That's right.
And, I took a trip to Brazil with Sergio in 1970 and auditioned, some of the artists down there. And the music that was coming out of Brazil in that particular period was stunning. They were real artists. it wasn't about the beat of the week trying to make a hit record. These people were just experiencing their own creativity and writing songs and doing things that were just, that was like magic. And they brought that here. Stan Getz was a catalyst to that, who recorded for us, by the way. Stan Getz, with Girl from Ipanema. And then he did this album with Charlie Bird, which was great. That was the start of it. That was 1962. But then when Sergio came and I heard this combination between Brazilian jazz and kind of pop sensibility with my wife Lonnie Hall singing. She was the lead singer with Sergio when I heard them. And they took it to another level and made people a little bit more aware of the types of songs that were happening. And you had artists like Dori Caymmi and Edu Lobo and those people. They were just really special.
And speaking of Lanny Hall, folks, they've been married 41 years. I just recently got engaged myself, and I'm asking them for tips, okay? Okay, about your own career, man. After the brass, kind of whatever happened, man, you had this huge disco hit, Rise, which you still hear today. Talk about the rise of Rise.
Well, that was kind of fortuitous. My nephew, Randy Badass Alpert, who's a great instinctive musician, writes these loops and does these musical things that he sends me and I put my horn over. But he said he had this idea. This was in 1969. He says, "Uncle," he says, "look it. Somebody's going to take all those Tijuana brass records and make disco records out of them." He says, "Why don't you do it before they do it?" I said, "Man, I don't know if I should try that. I mean, they're evergreens. Let's just let them be." At any rate, so the 3M company sent A&M as a test a 3M digital machine. It was a 32-track digital machine. It was the first one that was floating around in the country. And so I wanted to test it. So I said, okay, we'll take these songs and I'll see what the sound is like on these machines. So we started recording like Taste of Honey with boom, 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 that type of thing. I got nauseous. I couldn't do it, man. And I had these great musicians in the room, Studio D at A&M. And there was this song that Randy wrote with his partner then, Andy Armour, called Risa. So he wanted to do that, with a disco beat. Ba-da-da-da-dee, da-da-da-dee-da, that type of thing. I said, let's slow the thing down. Everybody's doing that beat. Let's two people dancing close together. Let's try it. So we slowed it down to 100 beats per minute, recorded it. It was recorded live with the musicians. I mean, there was no fancy stuff going on. It was live in the studio. I did overdub a trumpet on the bridge, and then we added a guitar and the hand claps. Other than that, it was a live recording. And it took a while for it to catch on, but once it did, it was a big hit.
It was a huge hit, too. One of your biggest, would you say Rise was one of your biggest hits?
Rise was one of the biggest. This Guy's in Love with You, the song I sang in 1968, was probably equal in sales. But Rise was definitely a breakthrough.
I also love that Herb currently now is such a philanthropist and also an artist. Have any of you folks seen his art? Oh my gosh. Is there a place where people can go see your artwork?
Well, right now at ACA Gallery in Chelsea, 528 West 20th, the show will be on until the 4th of April. But the smaller pieces, because I'm doing these large totems, these 18-foot bronze totems, which I think are pretty good.
When did that start? When did that art start?
Well, it started with painting. I've been painting for over 45 years. When I was traveling around the world with the Tijuana Brass, I'd go to these museums and I'd gravitate towards the modern art section. And I see these paintings on the wall. In a museum, a black painting with a purple dot. And then a purple painting, with a black dot. I said, I'd like to try that. I mean, So I grabbed some paints when I got home, and I bought canvas and started moving colors around with acrylic paint, like a monkey, just having fun doing it. And then little by little, it started to evolve because I had fun doing it. I was doing it for the fun of it. And then, one thing led to another. And years later, a gallery saw it and wanted to show it. So that was fine by me. And then I started getting into sculpting. And I was, with Lonnie, we were at Stanley Park in Vancouver, BC. And they had this big exhibit of these totems done by the Northwest Indians, carved totems. And so I started doing that in bronze, but it was more symbolic when I started because I was doing, they had reasons for doing their totems. They had, secret little family items in there. And then I started to riff on it and just do a jazz version, make the motion I liked and the feeling. And one thing changed my whole groove. I just have a great time doing it, and fortunately, other people are starting to like it. So,
I love change the groove. That's very cool. I also, Herb and I have talked before. I love when I asked you about what you did for UCLA. You didn't want a building in your name. You wanted your money to do something else at UCLA.
Well, sure. UCLA, we have the Herb Alpert UCLA music something.
School.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to erect a building and throw the money in that direction. I wanted it to help the staff, bring artists from different parts of the world that deserve to be, at a school like that. And the school is just a magnificent place where some great talent survives and thrives, great teachers. And now we have the Thelonious Monk Institute as part of it. So we got Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter and Terrence Blanchard and all those guys, the great jazz musicians in our country that are, in one way or another teaching at the school or doing master classes. But I'm very intent on trying to help this great legacy of ours that we developed here in the United States, that is such a, an amazing art form, jazz. I want to see it survive. It deserves to survive because it represents what I think everyone is looking for. There's a freedom attached to great jazz. When you hear a great jazz musician, you hear the freedom that they have. And I think that's what people are looking for all over the world. I think that's what's happening in the Middle East, man. People want freedom. And jazz represents that.
That's so cool. He should get a hand just for that, okay? And your own personal playing as a trumpeter. Where are you now? You happy with where you are as a trumpeter?
Well, you never get totally happy. As a musician, it's like Dizzy Gillespie was a friend of mine. I know I'm throwing out some names here, but Dizzy was a really interesting...
He's a walking music business trivia guy.
Dizzy was a great guy and a great teacher, but Dizzy used to say, he says, the closer I get, the farther it looks. And that's what it is when you're a musician. You play and there's always something you can't do and you try to do, and it's a never-ending process, but I love it. I love to play. I started playing when I was 8. I'm very intent on trying to see if we can, get these creative courses in public schools and private schools at a real early age, because I honestly feel that a child doesn't have a total education unless they rub elbows with something creative, because through that creative process, you get to experience your own uniqueness. Mm-hmm. And if you experience your own uniqueness, you have a chance on accepting someone else's uniqueness. And I think, it's a good thing. And unfortunately, our politicians, for some reason, they don't get it.
The last few years, Herb has been going out with a group with his wife, Lonnie Hall. I saw that band 2 years in a row. You guys look like you're having so much fun. Is there a new freedom in your music now?
I love to play. I feel there's a certain energy that I get from playing, especially with the musicians that we're traveling with, because We've been together for 9 years. We know each other really well. They're not hired guns. They're our personal friends as well. And so we have a great time doing it, and the reaction has been sensational. So it's a win-win-win.
Could Herb Alpert be signed today? If you were where you were starting years ago, could you be signed in the 21st century to a major record label?
Probably not. Seriously, I think, timing plays a part in it. And right now, record companies are not looking for a guy that plays the trumpet. You mean without the hit records behind me?
Yes.
No, I don't think I would be signed.
Do you miss the record business?
Not for an instant. No, because it's changed so dramatically over the years. It's a different look at when I started. This is way before anybody's time here. I had a wire recorder. It was a wire recorder, and then it went to like a 1-track mono machine, 2-track stereo. Then there was a 4-track machine, then an 8-track, and a 16-track. 24-track, then these 32-track digital machine that I was telling you about. And now, with the little unit, you can record umpteen tracks. You can have as many tracks as you want. And it's a little dangerous because, you have to make a decision. What's going on? We had a rock and roll group recording in our studio that was just a custom group, not one of our groups, but a known rock and roll group. They were recording there for about 3 months, and it came time to mix it down, to mix the recordings down to stereo, or however they wanted to mix it. And I said, "Man, this is going to be fun. I bet this is you're excited to do this, aren't you?" The guy and the lead player said, "Hey, not really, because we have the drums on 40 tracks." I said, "What do you do on 40 tracks?" I mean, when we recorded, you have a microphone for the drums, maybe one for the bass drum, one for this, and then you call it a day. But, I mean, these 40 tracks, they didn't want to miss anything, because maybe we'll use it somewhere down the line. So that type of indecision leads to, confusion, and also all these little doodads that you can make it in tune, you can change everything, you can take this little phrase here and push it over to So it's another world. In the 60s, we used to record. You record a record, it's live, or you get the track and then you put your thing on it and call it a day. Not anymore.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would love, if possible, to take questions from you folks. Anyone have any questions from Herb? Wait, miss.
First, I'd like to mention that I know you gave money to a school in Harlem to encourage those children to be able to access whatever musical talents they have. And I wanted to know from your background if your family encouraged you to move in that direction.
Well, I saw my father was very generous, and I feel like if you're given the gift of life, you should celebrate by trying to help others. I think that's just a natural thing to do. I've been blessed way beyond my needs, and I think it's just the right thing to do. Now, I saw this article in the paper about this Harlem school about ready to close, and I was thinking, wow, how could you do that in this community? I mean, it's not just the obvious people that have lived there, the Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong, Basie, and Joe Louis, and we're talking about Arthur Miller and Gershwin lived there. The Marx Brothers lived in Harlem. Houdini lived in Harlem. I mean, how can you do that? There's so many rich things have come out of that community. I just felt like I gotta do something, and I was a little. I felt like, where are the people in this area? Why don't they come to their rescue? But I feel really blessed that I did. The school is thriving now, and it's beautiful. I feel very proud that I was able to do that.
Hello. What was the best piece of advice that you've received throughout your career?
That's a good question. I mean, of course, honesty is the one that rings true, but somebody once told me, make sure that when you're communicating, make sure the music and the lyrics match, so you don't say one thing and think another. You know, make sure that what you're saying is deep and it's the real thing instead of trying to hide your feelings. So I've always tried to do that.
We had a question down front.
Gotcha. Hi. I was just wondering, what would be your advice to a young artist in this day and age in this music industry? And what do you feel about the music industry these days?
Right. Well, the best advice I can give is be passionate about what you're doing. If you're not totally passionate about wanting to be a singer, an artist, a trumpet player, guitar player, I mean, forget it. Don't do it, because while you're sleeping, somebody's practicing, and they want the same thing you do. So passion is the key.
We have time for one more question.
I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but how do you define an artist?
I define an artist by being an artist that is really true to what they're doing. You know, I'm like I said, I came up as a classical musician, then I switched over to jazz. I'm crazy about jazz. And when I heard the Carpenters, it wasn't the type of music that I particularly like or listen to. I wouldn't say like, but I recognized her incredible talent, her voice, their sincerity about what they were doing. They were making music that was real to them, coming out in an honest, truthful way, and that's the measure. It goes back to, it ain't what you do, it's the way how you do it. And what you need to do as an artist is find your own voice, your own way of doing it, because nobody wants to hear a carbon copy of somebody else. They want to hear the real goods, and that's why, you know, through the years, we loved the Billie Holidays, you know, those people that just, it was from the gut. It was Miles Davis who really understood the art form of jazz that, you know, touched us. And to me, the beauty of art is it's a mystery. The whole thing is you can't put your finger on it. You don't know why when you hear a record, you don't know why you like it. You can't pick it apart. The elements don't make sense. I played with Louis Armstrong, and the only thing I could come away with, man, this guy was, his personality and what came through the horn, it was in sync. It was just the way the guy was as a human being. I don't know.
What's on your iPod right now? Or in 20th century terms, what are you listening to?
Well, you know, when I really want to get revved up, I'll listen to classical music, like Ravel. You know, I'll listen to Daphnis and Chloe, and especially the fourth movement of it, where he has this choir going, and it's so expressive and so dramatic and dynamic. I mean, that really turns me on. I mean, the Miles Davises of the world, you know, people that have that thing, you know, Coltrane could do it, but he was a little overwhelming. When he played with Miles, he was like a little different story. He was a little calmer. And, you know, you know, the old story of Miles going up to Coltrane and says, man, you don't have to play chorus after chorus after chorus after chorus. And Miles and Coltrane said, I don't know how to stop. And so Miles says, well, take the freaking horn out of your mouth.
What about social media? Is there a place some folks can connect with you on social media? Do you have a website or?
You know, I don't really get involved in that too much. I don't know. It's just not my thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, Herb Alpert.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank Herb and all the folks at AOL. Thank you so much. Thank you.